I watched the hidden camera footage of my own son laughing as he stole my $500,000 home. He forged my signature on a quitclaim deed, claiming I owed him my life savings. The nauseating betrayal hit me so hard I tasted metallic bile in my throat. But to understand how I sent him to federal prison, I need to take you back. Topic Chapter 1. I let my only son and his new wife move into my paid-off home to save money. 3 months later, she stood in my custom kitchen and screamed at me to get out. It was a Tuesday. I had just driven home from the real estate law firm. I am a senior title examiner here in Tulsa. I spent 9 solid hours staring at dual monitors. I was untangling a messy chain of title on a commercial property. My eyes were burning. My lower back ached. I just wanted a glass of ice water. I pushed open my heavy mahogany front door. The air inside felt stifling. I dropped my car keys into the brass bowl on the entryway table. The metal clinked loudly in the quiet house. I slipped off my heels. I walked barefoot across the dark oak hardwood floors. I turned the corner into the kitchen. Sutton was standing at the center of my white quartz island. She is 24 years old. She was wearing a matching beige designer lounge set. A ring light and tripod were set up next to my grandmother's cast iron cookware. Strangers touching my grandmother's cast iron is a massive trigger for me. I took one step toward the stainless steel refrigerator. Sutton spun around. Her eyes were completely unhinged. She pointed a red silicone spatula directly at my face. The fangs were visibly bulging in her pale neck. She yelled, "Get the hell out of my kitchen! You're ruining the aesthetic!" Her voice echoed sharply off the 20-foot vaulted ceilings. The sheer volume of it hit me like a physical blow. Disorienting shock washed over me. My leather briefcase slipped off my shoulder. It hit the floorboards with a heavy thud. My hands went completely numb. I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my throat. I am 42 years old. I had my son Kellan when I was just 19. I was a terrified, exhausted teenage mother. I built my entire career from absolute nothing. I bought this $500,000 house in Maple Ridge with blood and time. My mind instantly flashed back to closing day in 2015. I stood on this exact front porch. The August heat was suffocating. I was holding the shiny brass keys in my palm. I was crying ugly, happy tears. Kellan was 14 at the time. He just stood next to me on the porch looking completely bored. He didn't look up from his phone once. He didn't understand the sacrifice it took to get us there. But I did. This house was my ultimate sanctuary. Later that night, I locked myself inside my master bedroom. The room was pitch black. The only illumination came from the harsh glow of my phone screen. I opened the Nest app. I pulled up the indoor camera footage. I needed to prove to myself I wasn't losing my mind. The timestamp in the corner read exactly 5:14 p.m. I pressed play. I watched the high-definition replay of my own humiliation. There was Sutton, screaming those exact words, pointing that spatula at my head. I paused the video right on her face. Her expression wasn't just angry, it was deeply territorial. Why was she so incredibly confident? Why did she explicitly call it her kitchen? You don't claim a room like that unless you firmly believe you own it. I read between the lines for a living. I know that the paperwork never lies. Something was terribly wrong here. But standing there in the kitchen earlier, I didn't know the truth yet. I just felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I didn't yell back. I just stared at the girl wearing my son's wedding ring. I wondered when exactly I became a trespasser in the house I paid off 5 years ago. Topic Chapter 2. My leather briefcase was still sitting on the entryway floor. I stared down at it. The heavy brass buckles caught the hallway light. I dropped it right there when Sutton claimed my kitchen. My pristine, paid-off kitchen. My heart was hammering against my ribs. The front door clicked open behind me. A gust of warm night air blew in. Kellan walked inside, my biological son. He was holding a damp plastic grocery bag from Resource. He didn't ask why I was standing in the dark. He didn't ask why my work bag was abandoned on the hardwood floor. He just stepped right over it. His muddy sneaker left a faint print near the leather strap. He walked straight past me toward the kitchen. I watched his shoulders disappear down the hall. My chest felt incredibly tight. As a senior title examiner, I know one absolute truth. The paperwork never lies. People lie. Documents do not. If Sutton actually thought she owned my house, there was a paper trail. I needed to pull the county property records. I would log into the firm's title database first thing tomorrow morning. I would trace every single document attached to this address. I walked slowly into the living room. I sat down heavily on the beige sofa. The house felt entirely different now. It felt hostile. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I opened my text messages. I scrolled back exactly 3 months. I found the old thread with Kellan. The screen glowed harshly in the dim room. The first text said, "Mom, please, just 6 months." The next text said, "Sutton is so stressed." The final one read, "We won't even be in your way." I stared at those words. I bought this house with blood and time. I raised Kellan as a struggling teenage mother. I worked 60-hour weeks. I sacrificed everything for this Maple Ridge property, but I let them move into my sanctuary. Sutton's luxury lifestyle brand had completely failed to launch. Her unsold inventory was sitting in my garage. They claimed they just needed 6 months to recover financially. They needed to save cash for a down payment on their own place. I agreed to help them, but I set very strict boundaries: no redecorating my neutral tones, no filming her content in my private spaces, absolutely no touching my grandmother's cast iron cookware. Sutton started testing those boundaries almost immediately. It started out small. She would leave her ring light in the hallway. Then it escalated. I remembered a specific conversation from exactly 3 weeks ago. We were sitting out on the back patio. The Oklahoma heat was already stifling that morning. Sutton was lounging in my favorite wicker chair. She was stirring an ice latte with a metal straw. The ice clinked loudly against the glass. It was a sharp, annoying sound. She looked at me over her oversized designer sunglasses. She casually asked what my property tax assessment was this year. I thought it was a highly specific, odd question. I told her it was none of her business. Then she asked about my homeowner's insurance policy. She wanted to know the exact coverage limits for the structure. I gripped my ceramic coffee mug a little tighter. The dark roast burned the back of my throat, and she leaned forward in the chair. She asked if the deed was complicated for native owners. I looked over at Kellan. He was sitting on the concrete patio steps. He wasn't looking at us. He was staring intensely at a patch of dead grass. He had physically turned his entire body away from me. His jaw was clenched tight. I felt a sharp pinch of maternal concern. It was mixed with deep, sudden irritation. Why did he look away? Why couldn't my own son meet my eyes? Especially when his wife asked about my home's equity. I sat alone on the living room sofa. I remembered that exact moment with sickening clarity. The plastic grocery bag rustled in the kitchen down the hall. Sutton's high-pitched laugh echoed through my house. My hands were completely cold against my phone case. I had dismissed her invasive questions that day. I thought she was just a tacky girl trying to sound smart about real estate. I should have recognized a predator sizing up its meal. I didn't sleep a single second that Tuesday night. By 7:30 Wednesday morning, I was sitting at my desk at the law firm. The office was completely empty. The air smelled like floor wax and stale coffee. My dual monitors cast a harsh white glow across my dark office. I logged into the Tulsa County Clerk's property database. My hands felt like ice on the keyboard. I typed in the legal description for the Maple Ridge house. Lot 12, Block 4. I hit enter. The paperwork never lies. The search results populated instantly on my left screen. My eyes locked onto the top row. A new document had been recorded just 3 days ago. Document type quitclaim deed. Grantor Kaya Thomas. Grantee, the Kellan and Sutton Family Trust. I stopped breathing. I could feel my heartbeat hammering in my throat. I clicked the blue hyperlink to open the scanned PDF. The document filled my right monitor. I scrolled straight to the third page, the signature page. There was my name, forged in cheap blue ink. The loops on the K and Y were entirely wrong. But that wasn't the detail that made my stomach crater. Right below my forged signature was a crisp black ink stamp. My official State of Oklahoma Notary Public Seal. Commission number 1400-892. Suddenly, the bizarre microaggressions of the last 2 weeks clicked into place. The missing mail. Sutton had suddenly become obsessed with checking the mailbox. Every afternoon, she would march down the driveway in her oversized designer sunglasses. She claimed she was waiting for Sephora packages. She wasn't. She was intercepting the automated fraud alert postcards sent by the county clerk. And then there was the breach of my locked home office. Last Friday, I had unlocked my antique brass-handled desk to grab a pen. My notary stamp was gone. I always keep it in the top right drawer. I got my commission back in 2010. I remember holding that first official stamp in my old cramped apartment. It was a symbol of my hard-won professional career. It proved I wasn't just a struggling teen mom anymore. I had searched the entire house for it. 2 days later, on Sunday morning, it miraculously reappeared. It was sitting right on my leather desk blotter. It was slightly misaligned from where I always keep it. I had taken my phone out immediately. I took a close-up photo of my desk drawer lock. The picture clearly showed fresh, bright scratch marks on the aged brass. Someone had picked the flimsy lock with a bobby pin or a paperclip. At the time, I thought Sutton was just snooping for bank statements. I had just rolled my eyes and locked the door again. I was so incredibly naive. I sat there in my quiet office, staring at the forged deed on the screen. Sutton's earlier questions about the property taxes echoed in my head. I remembered her leaning casually against my kitchen counter. She had specifically asked about native owner deed complications. She was making sure there were no federal restrictions blocking a transfer. She had planned this down to the absolute letter. I gripped the cold edge of my desk. My own biological son watched her steal my house. I closed the database. I grabbed my car keys and walked out of the firm. I drove straight to the electronics store on Skelly Drive. I bought a second hidden camera. This one was a tiny black cube, smaller than a dice. By noon, I was back at the Maple Ridge house. Sutton and Kellan's cars were gone. The house was dead silent. I walked straight into the living room. I wedged the new camera onto the top shelf of the tall oak bookcase. I hid it carefully behind a stack of thick hardback novels. I angled the tiny lens perfectly toward the entryway and the stairs. I opened the app on my phone and synced the video feed. The high-definition picture popped onto my screen. I bought this house with blood and time. I wasn't just dealing with an obnoxious daughter-in-law anymore. I gripped my phone until my knuckles turned white. I was dealing with a calculating criminal. You don't steal a title examiner's notary stamp to play office. You steal it to commit a felony. I spent Wednesday and Thursday watching that hidden camera feed. Nothing happened. Just empty rooms and silence on my phone screen. Friday afternoon, I left the law firm early. It was 3:15 p.m. I was sitting in bumper-to-bumper traffic on Interstate 44. The Oklahoma sun was beating down on my windshield. My phone buzzed in the center console. It was a text from my neighbor, Amari. He sent a screenshot of Sutton's Instagram story. I tapped the image to enlarge it. It was a wide shot of my formal dining room. The caption made the blood drain from my face. It read, "Finally hosting an Ojuar new home. Hashtag homeowner. Hashtag Tulsa real estate. Hashtag blessed." Suddenly everything clicked into place. That explained Tuesday in the kitchen. That explained why she so confidently called it her kitchen. She actually believed the forged quitclaim deed made it true. On paper, the house legally belonged to their fake trust right now. She was already playing Lady of the Manor. I slammed my foot on the gas the second traffic moved. I pulled into my Maple Ridge driveway at 3:42 p.m. There were 3 unfamiliar luxury SUVs parked on the street. I walked up the brick steps to my front porch. I slid my brass key into the deadbolt. It wouldn't turn. It didn't even fit. I pulled the key out and stared at the hardware. It was shiny and cheap. A brushed nickel quickset lock from Home Depot. It completely clashed with my antique brass handle. They had actually changed the locks on my front door, for safety, I'm sure. My hands started shaking. I walked around to the side of the house. I punched my code into the garage door keypad. Thank God Kellan hadn't bothered to reprogram that yet. The heavy door rumbled open. I stepped into the mudroom. 6 pairs of designer heels were scattered across my rug. I could hear loud, echoing laughter. The sharp clinking of expensive wine glasses. The smell of melted brie and heavy floral perfume filled the hallway. I walked straight toward the noise. I stopped in the doorway of the dining room. There were 6 young women in there. They were clustered around my custom dining table. 2 massive ring lights were set up in the corners. A giant charcuterie board sat directly on the bare wood. No placemats, no coasters. I bought that live edge walnut table in 2018. I saved up for 2 solid years to afford it. I remember tracing the raw grain with my fingers the day it was delivered. I bought this house with blood and time. Every single thing in it is mine. Sutton was pouring Prosecco into a crystal flute. She froze the second she saw me in the doorway. The bottle hovered in midair. The other women turned to look. One of them, a blonde in a beige blazer, smiled at me. She asked, "Oh, is this the caterer?" Sutton's face flushed a deep, ugly red. She gave a high-pitched, nervous little laugh. She looked right at her friends and said, "No, this is Kellan's auntie. She just helps out around the house sometimes." The room went dead silent to me. All I could hear was my own pulse drumming in my ears. White hot fury flooded my chest. My fingernails dug so hard into my leather purse I thought they would bleed. Have you ever been so angry your vision literally blurs at the edges? I took a deep, measured breath. I stepped fully into the room. I looked dead at the blonde in the blazer. I said, "I am not the help. I am the homeowner." I pointed a shaking finger at the front door. "And this private event is over. Get your things and get out." Sutton dropped the Prosecco bottle. It hit my hardwood floor and shattered. Glass shards and pale wine splashed across the baseboards. "Kaya, please," Sutton hissed through gritted teeth. "You're embarrassing me." I stepped right over the broken glass. I leaned in close to her face. I could smell the alcohol on her breath. I said, "You have exactly 60 seconds to get these people off my property, or I am calling the Tulsa police to report a break-in." The influencers scrambled. They grabbed their designer bags and practically sprinted for the front entryway. Nobody said a single word. The heavy oak front door slammed shut behind them. Sutton stood there in the puddle of spilled wine. Her fists were clenched at her sides. Her sweet influencer facade was completely gone. She looked at me with pure, unmasked hatred. Kellan wasn't even there. He was probably hiding at his office, letting her play house with my stolen equity. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. The paperwork never lies, and neither do I. I threw her friends out, changed the locks back, and told Kellan they had 30 days to leave. I thought I was ending the nightmare. I was actually just triggering the trap. Top to chapter 5. I couldn't sleep. The silence in the house felt heavy, like a held breath. Kellan had taken the 30-day notice and walked out without a single word. Sutton had grabbed her ring light and stormed out right behind him. Now they were gone. The front door was dead bolted with my original brass key. Sutton's brushed nickel quickset lock was sitting in the trash. The broken Prosecco glass was still in the dustpan in the kitchen. But the dread in my stomach was entirely real. It was 3:14 a.m. I was sitting in the dark in my home office. The blue light from my dual monitors cast long shadows across my leather desk blotter. My hands were shaking. I'm a senior title examiner. I track down property fraud for a living. I know exactly how to look for ghosts in the paperwork. So I went straight to the source. I opened the browser. I logged into the Tulsa County Clerk's Property Records database. My fingers were stiff over the keyboard. I'd bypassed the standard name search. I went straight to the parcel ID lookup. It is always more accurate. I typed in my own address, Maple Ridge, the house I bought with blood and time. The system lagged. A little gray loading wheel spun on the screen. The only sound in the room was the hum of my computer tower. Then, the page loaded. I stared at the screen. My hands went completely numb. I blinked, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me in the dark. They weren't. The current owner listed was no longer my name, it was an LLC. The text on the screen read, Maple Ridge Holdings LLC. A wave of nauseating terror washed over me. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I grabbed my ceramic coffee mug. The coffee inside was freezing cold. I took a sip anyway just to ground myself. Who owns Maple Ridge Holdings LLC? I already knew the answer. My gut was screaming it at me. I closed my eyes. A memory hit me so hard it stole my breath. It was 2020. Kellan and I were sitting at the live edge walnut table in the dining room. He was 20 years old. He had just changed his major to business. I was so proud of him. I pulled out a stack of old property records to show him. I was showing a younger Kellan exactly how property deeds worked. I traced the grantor and grantee lines with my red pen. I told him that real estate is the only true wealth in this world. I taught him how to protect it. I taught him how chains of title work, how a single piece of paper transfers an entire legacy. He was taking notes. He looked so interested. He wasn't learning for his future. He was studying my playbook. I opened my eyes. The blue glow of the monitor was still there. The nightmare was real. I looked at the filing details. The date filed was exactly 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. Right around the time Sutton started asking all those highly specific questions about my equity. An LLC, a corporate shield. They were trying to hide behind a business entity. It is a classic fraudster move. It makes it harder to immediately reverse the transfer. This was the trap I had just triggered. My 30-day eviction notice meant absolutely nothing to them. They didn't think they were my tenants. They thought they were the landlords. I clicked the link to view the associated documents, a PDF file downloaded to my desktop. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. I double-clicked the file. It was a standard Oklahoma quitclaim deed. Grantor, Kaya. Grantee, Maple Ridge Holdings, LLC. The paperwork never lies, but it can be weaponized. I scrolled down to the execution page, the page where the seller legally signs away their rights. I pulled up the scanned image of the deed. There, at the bottom, was my forged signature. And right next to it, the crisp blue ink of my own stolen notary stamp. It was 3:17 a.m. on Saturday morning. I was still sitting at my home office desk. The glow from my dual monitors was the only light in the house. Kellan and Sutton were gone. I had no idea where they went after I ruined their little Prosecco party. The front door had slammed shut 2 hours ago. But I didn't care. I had work to do. A forged quitclaim deed is a sloppy crime. But transferring that forged deed to an LLC? That is a corporate shield. It is a calculated legal fortress designed to hide assets. I cracked my knuckles. My hands were freezing. The air conditioning kicked on, rattling the vent above my head. I opened a new tab on my browser. I navigated to the Oklahoma Secretary of State Business Registry. I typed Maple Ridge Holdings, LLC into the search bar. I hit enter. The database took 3 seconds to load. Those 3 seconds felt like an entire lifetime. The corporate filing popped up on my screen. I scrolled down past the formation date. I stopped at the registered agent line. The name was printed in plain black text. Richard Vance. My stomach dropped. I tasted metallic bile in the back of my throat. I grabbed my ceramic coffee mug. The coffee was ice cold, but I took a sip anyway. I needed to swallow the nausea. Richard Vance is Sutton's father. My mind snapped back to their wedding 1 year ago. The reception was at a pretentious country club in South Tulsa. I remembered standing near a melting ice sculpture. Richard walked up to me. He owns a string of buy here, pay here car dealerships. He reeked of cheap cologne and expensive bourbon. He looked me up and down. He said, "I hear you've got a place in Maple Ridge." I nodded politely. He smiled this greasy, predatory smile. He said, "Prime real estate. Let me know if you ever want to sell." I brushed it off at the time. I shouldn't have. I blinked at my monitor. The cursor was blinking right next to his name. I hit print. The laser printer whirred to life in the corner of my office. I grabbed the warm paper from the tray. I took a yellow highlighter from my leather desk blotter. I dragged a thick yellow line across Richard's name. Suddenly, everything clicked. The memory hit me like a physical blow. 2 months ago, Sutton sat at my live-edge walnut dining table. She was sipping an iced latte through a metal straw. She had asked me a very specific question. She wanted to know about my homeowner's insurance policy. She asked about my exact coverage limits. A week later, she asked about my county property tax assessment. I thought she was just trying to learn about homeownership. I even felt proud of her for taking an interest. I was so stupid. She wasn't making small talk. She was gathering documentation. Insurance limits and tax assessments are strictly required for bank underwriting. They were applying for a home equity line of credit. Or worse, a full cash-out refinance. Here is the anatomy of their fraud. Sutton and Kellan forged the quitclaim deed to themselves. Then, they immediately transferred the title to her father's LLC. Why? To extract a massive cash payout. They were draining the $600,000 of equity I spent 20 years building. They turned my blood and time into a blank check for a used car salesman. But they made one fatal mistake. They used my actual official notary stamp, Commission 1489-2, in crisp blue ink. In the state of Oklahoma, a notary stamp is completely useless without the logbook. Every single notarized signature must be recorded sequentially. It must include the signer's thumbprint and driver's license number. My official logbook is locked in a fireproof safe at my law firm. There is no entry for this fraudulent deed. The paperwork never lies. The absolute absence of that log entry is my physical evidence. It legally proves the forgery. I stared at the yellow highlighter ink on the page. A sickening question crept into my mind. Did Kellan know the full extent of this theft? He helped orchestrate the corporate shield. I taught him how to file those LLC papers in 2020. But did he know Sutton's family was cashing out all the equity? Was my son the mastermind, or just a useful idiot in his wife's heist? I folded the printed LLC registration in half. I slipped it into my leather briefcase. The house was dead silent. They weren't here tonight, but for the last 2 weeks. They stole my house, sold it to her father, and cashed out my equity. And my son was sleeping down the hall, pretending everything was fine. By 9:15 on Saturday morning, the house was suffocatingly bright. I stood by the front window. I watched Sutton's white SUV pull out of the Maple Ridge driveway. She was headed to her morning Pilates class. Kellan and I were finally alone. I grabbed my leather briefcase from the dining room table. My hands felt completely numb. I walked straight into the kitchen. Kellan was standing by the espresso machine. He was pouring almond milk into a ceramic mug. I didn't say a single word. I just pulled the printed LLC registration out of my bag. I slapped it down on the live-edge walnut island. I pulled out the forged quitclaim deed next. I laid it right beside his coffee cup. The cheap blue ink of my forged signature stared up at him. Kellan froze. The milk carton slipped from his grip. It hit the counter with a heavy thud. A white puddle spilled across the polished wood. He looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. All the color drained from his face. His jaw trembled. "Mom," he whispered. His voice cracked perfectly down the middle. I crossed my arms over my chest. My heart was hammering against my ribs. "Explain this," I said. "Explain how Richard Vance owns my house." Kellan staggered backward. He gripped the edge of the kitchen counter for support. And then my 24-year-old son broke. He buried his face in his hands. His shoulders started shaking violently. Loud, ugly sobs echoed through the pristine kitchen. "She lied to me," he choked out. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. Sutton said it was just a trust transfer. He pointed a shaking finger at the LLC document. She said it would protect the asset from probate. I stared at him. I wanted to see the mastermind who orchestrated my ruin. But I didn't. I just saw my little boy. My mind flashed back to the summer of 2003. We were living in a cramped apartment on Skelly Drive. I remembered the smell of hot asphalt that summer. I was working 2 jobs just to afford groceries. Kellan was just a toddler. He had tripped on the concrete stairs. I remember wiping the blood off his scraped knee. I put a plastic dinosaur band-aid over the cut. I held him while he cried into my shoulder. I promised him I would always fix his mistakes. I bought this house with blood and time. I did it all for him, to give him a life where he didn't have to struggle. That maternal instinct is a dangerous, blinding thing. It overrode every shred of my legal training. "They're trying to steal $600,000 in equity," I told him. "A cash-out refinance. The bank is underwriting the loan right now." Kellan's eyes went wide. "I didn't know," he gasped. "You didn't know her father was the registered agent?" I asked. Kellan shook his head frantically. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. "No, Mom, I swear." He grabbed my wrist. His palms were sweaty and cold. "I didn't know he was buying it. I would never let them take your house." He begged for my forgiveness. He promised we would go to the police station together. He swore he would testify against Sutton. I needed to get to my law firm. My official notary logbook was locked in a fireproof safe there. That logbook was the only way to prove the stamp was stolen. It would prove the sequential entry for this deed didn't exist. I had to present it to the bank before they wired the money. But first, I needed to secure my son. I needed his confession in writing. The paperwork never lies. I pulled a yellow legal pad from my briefcase. I slid a blue ballpoint pen across the kitchen island. "Write it down," I told him. "Write exactly what she made you do." Kellan didn't hesitate. He clicked the pen. He leaned over the walnut counter. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely form the letters. I stood behind him and watched the ink flow. A tear dropped from his chin. It hit the yellow paper, smudging the blue ink. The handwritten note was pathetic and beautiful. It read, "Sutton said it was just paperwork." I didn't know her dad was buying it. "I'm sorry, Mom." I picked up the damp legal pad. This was my leverage. This was the proof I needed to save him. I carefully folded the tear-stained confession in half. I tucked it safely into my briefcase pocket. I looked at my son. He looked like a scared little boy again. A massive wave of heartbreaking relief washed over me. He wasn't a monster. He was just a fool manipulated by a predator. I walked around the kitchen island. I wrapped my arms around his shaking shoulders. He buried his face in my neck and sobbed. I could smell his mint toothpaste and stale coffee. I stroked his hair. I hugged my son. I told him we would fix it. I promised him that Sutton would go to jail. I told him he would be safe. I was such a fool. Top of chapter 8. The doorbell rang at 8:14 a.m. on Sunday. I thought it was the police coming to take Sutton's statement. I was dead wrong. I walked to the front entryway. The hardwood floors were freezing against my bare feet. I unlocked the heavy brass deadbolt. I pulled the oak door open. A man in a faded blue polo shirt stood on my porch. He held a thick manila envelope. He looked completely bored. He asked, "Kaya Vance?" I nodded. My throat felt like sandpaper. He shoved the envelope directly into my chest. "You've been served," he said. He turned and walked down my concrete driveway. I stood perfectly still on the front porch. The morning air was biting cold. My hands started to tremble violently. I tore the glued flap open. I pulled out a thick stack of legal paper. At the top, in bold black ink, it said, 3-day notice to quit. There was a fresh red stamp from the Tulsa County Court. The plaintiff listed was Maple Ridge Holdings, LLC. The registered agent was Richard Vance. I stared at the words. My brain simply could not process them. I was officially listed as a holdover tenant. The document demanded immediate surrender of the premises. My mind violently snapped back to October 2020. I was standing in my backyard by the stone fire pit. The evening air smelled like burning paper. I had just dropped my final mortgage statement into the flames. I watched the thick paper curl and turn to ash. I remembered eating ramen noodles for 3 straight years. I remembered working double shifts at the title company while Kellan was in daycare. I own this house free and clear. I bought this house with blood and time. Now, a piece of paper claimed I was a squatter, a trespasser in my own home. I stepped back into the foyer. I closed the front door. The metal latch clicked shut. Then I heard footsteps on the stairs. I looked up. Sutton was walking down the carpeted steps. She was wearing a matching beige lounge set. She carried a sleek leather weekend bag over her shoulder. In her right hand, she held an iced matcha latte. The thick green liquid sloshed against the clear plastic cup. She took a slow, deliberate sip through a metal straw. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at the legal papers in my shaking hands. A slow, sickening smirk spread across her face. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab her by her perfectly styled hair, but my voice was completely trapped. "My dad filed it on Friday," she said. Her voice was chillingly calm. "You have exactly 72 hours to get your stuff out." I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. The corporate shield was already moving. They had weaponized the court system against me. The bank was probably underwriting the $600,000 cash-out refinance right now. I looked past her into the kitchen. My grandmother's cast iron cookware was still hanging above the live-edge walnut island. Every single thing I loved was inside these walls. I finally found my voice. I looked right at her. I said, "This is my house." I took a step forward. "You forged my signature." Sutton just laughed. It was a high, breathy sound that echoed in the foyer. "The paperwork never lies, Kaya," she said. "And the county clerk says the property belongs to the LLC. She took another sip of her drink. "You're just a crazy tenant refusing to leave." She was so incredibly confident. She actually thought she had won. She didn't know about the tear-stained confession sitting upstairs. She didn't know Kellan had written everything down on that yellow legal pad. I thought my son and I were finally on the same side. I thought we were going to fight this together. I gripped the eviction notice until the paper crumpled in my fist. I said, "We'll see what the judge says about that." Sutton adjusted the strap of her designer bag. The ice cubes clinked loudly in her plastic cup. Sutton smiled and whispered, "Have fun in an apartment, Kaya." But she wasn't the one who broke my heart. The real knife in the back came from the living room. Topic, Chapter 9. I sat in my home office at 8:14 a.m. on Sunday. The house was dead silent. My official notary logbook rested on the leather desk blotter. I had driven to the law firm yesterday afternoon. I pulled this heavy-bound logbook straight from the fireproof safe. I flipped through the thick pages. The paperwork never lies. It proved I never recorded that forged quitclaim deed. There was no sequential entry. There was no thumbprint. There was no ID record. But the paper trail suddenly felt entirely meaningless. The real knife in my back didn't come from the county clerk's database. It came from the living room. The formal 3-day notice to quit sat right next to my keyboard. The fresh red stamp from the Tulsa County Court glared at me. I was officially a holdover tenant in my own home. I had exactly 72 hours to vacate the property. The bank was actively underwriting their $600,000 cash-out refinance right now. I needed to finalize my legal strategy before Monday morning. Instead, I picked up my phone. I opened the Nest app. I accessed the tiny black cube hidden camera, the one I tucked onto the tall oak bookcase in the living room. I scrolled the timeline back to last night. The timestamp read 11:42 p.m. This was exactly 20 minutes after Kellan sobbed into my shoulder. 20 minutes after I stroked his hair. 20 minutes after I promised to protect him from Sutton's family. The video loaded in grainy night vision black and white. Kellan and Sutton were sitting on my living room sofa. He wasn't crying. He wasn't shaking. He was laughing. My hands went completely numb. The phone felt heavy. I watched my biological son raise his hand. He gave his wife a high five. I turned the volume all the way up. The audio hissed through my phone speaker. Kellan leaned back against the cushions. He looked right at Sutton. "She bought it," he said. The crying totally worked. My stomach violently dropped. I gripped the edge of my antique brass desk. My knuckles turned stark white. Sutton smiled. She kicked her bare feet up onto my live-edge walnut coffee table. She asked him if he felt bad about the eviction. Kellan actually scoffed. The sound echoed through the quiet room. "Are you kidding?" he said. "She owed me." I stopped breathing. The cursor blinked on my dual monitors. I just stared at the little glowing screen in my hand. Kellan kept talking. He told his wife that having him at 19 ruined my life. He said I blamed him for losing my 20s. "I'm just taking my inheritance early," he said. "Dad's wire transfer clears tomorrow morning, right?" Sutton nodded. She leaned over and kissed his cheek. My vision actually blurred. The air in the office felt freezing cold. I tasted copper in the back of my mouth. A memory hit me so hard I almost threw up on the rug. It was 2005. I was 25 years old. I remembered the exact smell of stale coffee and fryer grease. I was falling asleep at a diner counter on Skelly Drive. I was wearing a cheap polyester uniform with a name tag. I worked 3 jobs just to keep the heat on in our cramped apartment. I skipped meals so Kellan could have brand name sneakers for school. I gave up my entire youth to build a fortress around that boy. And here he was, sitting in the fortress I bought with blood and time, selling me out for a cash-out refinance. He wasn't manipulated by Richard Vance. He wasn't a naive victim trapped in a corporate LLC scheme. He was the mastermind. He used the title examination skills I taught him in 2020. He knew exactly how to structure Maple Ridge Holdings LLC. He weaponized my own maternal instinct against me. He knew I would forgive his tears. He factored my love into his business plan. I set the phone down on the desk. It clinked against my ceramic coffee mug. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. A strange heavy silence settled over my shoulders. The heartbreak was completely gone. In its place was something cold, dark, and highly methodical. I looked at the forged quitclaim deed PDF on my monitor. I looked at the official notary logbook in front of me. I looked at the 3-day notice to quit. They thought they had won. They thought the 72-hour clock was ticking down on my eviction. They didn't realize it was ticking down on their freedom. My son didn't just stab me in the back. He twisted the blade and asked for his inheritance. So I decided to give him exactly what he deserved. I didn't pack a single cardboard box. The 72-hour eviction notice sat on my live-edge walnut coffee table. It was Sunday morning, exactly 8:45 a.m. The bank was set to wire $600,000 to Richard Vance tomorrow. I grabbed my car keys. I drove straight to my real estate law firm. The Sunday morning streets were completely empty. I unlocked the heavy glass doors of the office. The air conditioning hummed in the silent foyer. I walked to my desk. I woke up my dual monitors. I didn't draft a defense. I went on the offensive. I typed up an emergency injunction. I'll list pendants. That is a notice of pending action. I printed it on the laser printer. The paper was still warm when I grabbed it. You see, title examiners know how to break a fraudulent chain. A lease pendants acts like a brick wall. It freezes the property title completely. No bank will underwrite a cash-out refinance with a pending lawsuit. That $600,000 was locked. Next, I built my federal case. I placed my official notary logbook on the leather desk blotter. I highlighted the missing sequential entry in bright yellow. I printed the forged quitclaim deed PDF. I grabbed the photo of my scratched antique brass desk lock. I burned the Nest camera audio onto a black flash drive. Kellan's tear-stained confession on yellow legal pad paper went in last. I slid everything into a thick manila envelope. I sealed the brass buckles tight. I didn't wait for the Tulsa County Court. I didn't care about the local police station. Wire fraud involving a federally chartered bank is a federal offense. Monday morning, I walked into the FBI field office on 71st Street. I sat in a cold metal chair in the lobby. A special agent finally called me back. I dropped the manila envelope onto a steel desk. I gave him the corporate filing for Maple Ridge Holdings, LLC. I gave him Richard Vance's name. I explained the Monday morning wire transfer. I played the hidden camera audio from my phone. The agent's eyes widened. He took my official statement. Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting in my wicker chair on the back patio. My phone buzzed loudly against the glass table. Omari sent me a text. It said, "Look at the local news channel right now." I opened the video link. The screen showed a quick-trip parking lot on Memorial Drive. Flashing red and blue lights illuminated the pavement. A white SUV was surrounded by 3 federal cruisers. I watched the live video feed. Sutton was sobbing uncontrollably. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. Her designer sunglasses were pushed up on her head. Her wrists were zipped in thick plastic cuffs. Kellan was standing against the brick wall of the gas station. His head was hanging low. 2 FBI agents were searching Sutton's sleek leather weekend bag. They weren't going to a Pilates class. They were trying to flee the state. Now, it is Wednesday morning. I am standing alone in my kitchen. The morning sun is hitting the live-edge walnut island. My grandmother's cast iron cookware is safely hanging above the stove. I take a slow sip from my ceramic coffee mug. The dark roast tastes perfect. 2 documents are sitting perfectly aligned on the cold quartz counter. One is the stamped list pentens. The other is a copy of the federal indictment. Defendants, Sutton Vance, Kellan, and Richard Vance. Charges: wire fraud, identity theft, forgery. Just 1 week ago, Sutton stood in this exact spot. She had pointed her acrylic nail at my chest. She had screamed, "Get out of my kitchen!" I smile at the memory. I trace the Tulsa County Court stamp with my finger. The paperwork never lies. I bought this house with blood and time. No entitled brat was going to steal it. No traitorous son was going to sell my future. I'm 42. I own my house free and clear. And my son is currently learning how to make his bed in a federal holding cell. Meanwhile, I finally have my kitchen exactly the way I like it. Quiet. If this story hit you, drop a like. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear more. Turn on notifications and hit that bell so you never miss a case. Drop a comment. I read every single one. I want to know, where are you watching this from right now? What time is it there?